Hey everyone, I'm Carter.
I'm Erin.
I'm Jennifer.
I'm John.
And I'm Riley.
And today we're presenting our plan and background information for a community orchard in Camrose.
To start our presentation, we would like to acknowledge that the University of Alberta Augustana campus respectfully acknowledges that it is located at Assiniskosepieces, also known as Stony Creek, in Treaty 6 territory. This territory provided a traveling route and home to the Maskawachis, Nahiawik, Nisatapi, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations, along with the Métis and other Indigenous peoples.
A website that provided a lot of our general information on community orchard was called Orchard People. The definition that they provide for what a community orchard is goes as follows. A community orchard is a collection of fruit trees in a public space planted with the goal of providing the community with fresh local fruit. Again, as listed within the Orchard People website, a few possible reasons for growing a community orchard are to encourage locals to eat more sustainably, and it provides opportunities for urban agriculture. Specifically, as noted in Caradonna's article, Sustainability, a History, the word sustainable is often used in a corrective way, and essentially what this means is the act of being sustainable is an attempt to correct our wrongdoings towards the environment. Building and maintaining a community orchard is an act of sustainability because, as mentioned on the Orchard People website, it provides local fruit to a certain degree, but it mainly can be used to teach others about growing their own food. Despite the fact that community orchards are typically smaller scale projects, they do come up in conversation about areas struggling with food security. In an article written by Ursula Ramsey, community orchards are referenced as a possible answer for the issue of food security in Appalachia. While this project has dealt with the task of planting a community orchard for less dire reasons, community orchards do have somewhat of an untapped potential. As mentioned by Caradonna, being truly sustainable is not only a response to the environment, but also creating an overall balanced society.
To add on to what Carter has said, community orchards provide people with a better connection to food and strengthens connections within the community members as well. In some cases, there may even be pride from being part in such a great community collaboration and having something delicious to show for it later on. I was able to reach out and have conversations with a couple of individuals from other cities. The multiple successful orchards these cities have established show us that community orchards is a feasible plan and it is possible to have great success. From the surplus of information gained, I would like to note some of the aspects that stood out the most. Starting with Red Deer, one factor was that some of the orchards were located next to community gardens. This helped enhance the spaces and keeps the projects localized together and also helps with ease of access for volunteers. There have also been opportunities to learn about planting when the orchards were first being implemented. Not only does this provide education, but it also gets the community excited about being involved and gives people the chance to be a part of the project from an earlier point. Something that is currently in the works is a website with information of fruit species, when and how to harvest, and what to do with the produce. With this, there may be signage within the orchard about the types of fruit growing to gain quicker access to the web page and the knowledge contained. Next, with Grand Prairie, an important note came up was that once an orchard is well established a few years down the line, they can be quite self-sufficient and require minimal maintenance. As with the Grand Prairie orchards, they only do lots of work at the beginning when planting, but after the trees get growing, they don't prune, really, and only water every so often. Additionally, they use temporary fencing of chicken wire around the area in order to help the trees get a head start of the wildlife, which is very important to consider in Camrose. It was also interesting to learn that Grand Prairie is a bee city, meaning they are committed to helping pollinators. We feel this is an excellent step to add into an orchard, which is mentioned more later on. Building on this, I was able to ask about community response and volunteer turnout, and in both cases, the projects have been very successful, and this response from the community is fantastic. An additional note is that Camrose is located in Growing Zone 3, and both Red Deer and Grand Prairie are as well. With this in mind, both of these orchard examples can aid in hardy fruit selection down the line.
Just as community orchards have thrived in these other nearby communities, there are numerous benefits to a community orchard that could provide to our own, increasing not only green space in our community, but also providing an educational experience for residents through educational workshops about sustainable living and how consuming local produce can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In addition to this, it would provide a space for the numerous elementary and junior high schools in Camrose for experiential learning outside of the classroom, perhaps even playing a role in its maintenance. In addition to educational benefits for the community, an orchard would provide, given enough time for growth of fruit-bearing trees, a food source for those who may desperately need it, such as donating some of the produce to food banks or low-income communities. The orchard would also provide many volunteer and training opportunities. As students, we're well aware of how many programs and scholarships require volunteer experience, and having a community orchard would certainly increase the amount of these opportunities in the community. The training from this experience could also serve useful for those interested in starting their own orchards or pursuing jobs oriented in this field.
All right, so the specific area where the orchard will be located is an important part of the planning process. As accessibility and convenience are integral parts of getting people to eat locally, the orchard location should be easily accessible by car, public transport, and walking. After talking with Ken Kruger, the manager of parks for the city of Camrose, out of our options, he recommended that the area around the existing community garden plots along Parkview Drive, which is pictured below, would be ideal as it was once a tree nursery. Other benefits of this area include its close proximity to residential areas, the Deer Meadows Retirement Home, city walking trails, and the Stony Creek Center. Additionally, as this land is already being used as the purchasable garden plots, there's already a community of gardeners. Lastly, as this area is highly accessible, it can incentivize volunteers. Seniors and nearby homes would have less than a 5-minute walk to the orchard, and students attending the University of Alberta Augustana campus would have only a 1.8-kilometer walk to go there.
There are many options for the planning and management, but to make things more simple, we suggest a nonprofit organization. There are benefits to a nonprofit organization, such as certain tax exemptions, but it also seems to make sense for the purpose of the community orchard. Whatever funds may be earned from the creation and maintenance of the orchard would be recycled back into the orchard to continue its development. Funds may be received by partners and/or any opportunities that could be presented for sale, such as membership programs or sales at farmers markets. But if a nonprofit is formed, there still needs to be a discussion about ownership. There are multiple avenues that can be taken to figure this out. First, a sole proprietorship. This option would act in the same way as an independent contractor, where one owner is liable for the community orchard. An example of an organization which might be useful for this option would be the Camrose Horticultural Society, which is a group of gardeners. If the owner of the orchard does not have gardening experience, the Horticultural Society would be a great option for the potential training and management of the orchard. A second option is a partnership model of ownership. In this case, there is a division between obligations. For instance, there may be a partnership between the university and the city of Camrose, where a representative from each institution would be responsible for the community orchard's operation. The third option is public ownership, which would be run by the city of Camrose and paid for by the people of Camrose. This option has many interesting dimensions as it depends on the acceptance of the city council and, of course, the people of Camrose. The last form of governance is an Indigenous model. While Indigenous peoples would be greatly encouraged to participate regardless, the Indigenous model of governance focuses more so on the engagement of the Indigenous community within the community orchard operation. As sustainability requires equal efforts in counterbalancing all components of society by having Indigenous peoples as part of the ownership, it would create greater inclusion for minorities within Camrose.
Another crucial step in creating a community orchard is finding volunteers to help with the project. So a few ways that we found to recruit volunteers includes reaching out to related companies, sporting clubs, schools, putting ads in the newspaper, and also reaching out to close friends and family for offered support. We can also partner with the Camrose District and support services, as well as Carter mentioned before, reaching out to the Horticultural Society of Camrose to help recruit more volunteers, as well as properly train them for the planting process. We also decided, since it's in such close proximity to the seniors' home, that we would be able to possibly recruit seniors as well to help with the planting and the weeding and some minor maintenance of the orchard. Volunteer hours for high school students would also be a great benefit and would also help recruit more volunteers for the project. We also said if it is a paid membership program, whoever decides on the governance of this, discounts could also be available for those who are willing to come in and volunteer. Just that way it's a greater incentive to volunteer in the orchard. And then we also have a good way to recruit more people. Another thing that we have to consider is who gets to pick. So a few options that we mention is community members get to harvest however much they would like with no limits. Community members can also purchase this annual membership, and then whoever decides, they get to pick, a certain amount per week or per day. It is sometimes hard to keep track of if we don't have an actual fence or person keeping control of that. We also have the option that only those who have volunteered with setup and maintenance can pick, or anyone gets to harvest in the community within limits without a membership.
Looking at potential financial support for this project, there are several grants from organizations that would be available to support the project in our community, including orchard grants from the People's Trust for Endangered Species nonprofit organization, which has grants opening again this fall and would cover all cost of grafting materials, rootstock, and trees. Another grant that would be available would be the tree grants from the Tree Canada organization. These grants are aimed to support community groups in planting edible trees on publicly accessible sites through funding and technical support. Other than grants, we could look at support from sponsors in the community, including donations from businesses and residents willing to contribute either financially or through manpower or equipment. Finally, another option could be fundraising events such as community auctions or raffles.
One final step in the initial setup of a community orchard is determining where the water to take care of the orchard comes from. So rain barrels can be used for water collection and storage. Hoses for drip lines can be attached directly to the barrels, or plants can be hand watered. Another option is using water pumps from nearby bodies of water, depending on location. Or another option includes installing a campground water pump with access to the city water line. A campground pump does require a bit more maintenance to set up because of the initial digging and attachment to the water source. A few tips that we found for conserving water and to help cut back on cost includes using mulch as ground cover to help the soil retain water, and placing multiple drip lines on only fruit-producing trees and not perennials. The perennials can only be watered on an occasional basis as needed, as it'll be helpful for local pollinators.
One potential idea we had that would help the orchard was the incorporation of pollinator housing like the Grand Prairie Orchard. The first option we had for housing was putting up empty bee homes for native species and supporting other local pollinators like butterflies with small flowering plants. This would help the growth of local pollinator populations and would also have low cost and low maintenance. This option would also foster local biodiversity. Our other option for pollinator housing was the incorporation of honeybee boxes for the orchard. This would give the opportunity for fresh local honey to be another takeaway from the orchard, however, would need a beekeeper for maintenance. Additionally, the higher concentration of honeybees in the area would be great for the orchard trees and plants. However, one consideration for both options is that as more bees are present in the area, there is a higher likelihood for bee stings. This could, however, be mitigated by proper education about safety around bees and the bee housing being slightly distanced from the orchard, as well as being well signed. All right, so while many decisions need to be finalized, we want to end our presentation with suggestions for the future, including continuing to make partnerships with the local organizations and continued communication with local schools. We also think beginning to gauge public interest, continuing with advertising, and beginning our volunteer recruitment will be really important steps to get the orchard started when the time comes. So here are our references, and we want to thank you guys all for watching, and we can take any questions.